complement the previous pieces of legislation. I also mentioned the SIPDDA, SIPDA, the Services and Supports to Promote the Social Inclusion of Persons with Developmental Disabilities Act. That speaks to the requirement for DSO eligibility, for which we do assessments as well. And the Regulated Health Professions Act, which regulates the professions other than teachers. In this case, in our board, this would apply to speech-language pathologists as well as psychologists and psychological associates. So the Psychology Act under RHPA speaks specifically to the role of psychologists, and I have listed the particular regulations under the Act, and there is a hyperlink here that you can follow to find the legislation. And it is noteworthy that the standards of professional conduct issued by the College of Psychologists of Ontario is considered the standards of the profession under the regulation professional misconduct. So any of those standards that apply to our work as psychologists are considered standard, and anything that is in contradiction to those standards is considered professional misconduct under that regulation. In terms of PPMs, I have listed PPM 8, which is maybe the most well-known, which is the one PPM that has actually revised one of the identifications, one of the exceptionalities for students with learning disabilities. I know that in past years there was some push to also revise the other exceptionalities definitions, but that has not occurred yet. Whereas PPM has made big strides in kind of further defining learning disabilities and what's required to identify students with learning disabilities, and it kind of puts a clear framework around what our assessments need to look like in that area. PPM 459 is a bit of an older PPM that speaks to psychological testing and assessment of pupils within school boards. And I also listed PPM 156, supporting transitions for students with special education needs, in terms of assessments being one tool to help in program planning for transitions, whether it is from elementary school to high school or from secondary school to post-secondary. Within our board, as you well know, because we've just had a review of those last year, we have policy 213 that refers to assessment, and procedure EIN 89, which is the procedure that goes with that policy. I just want to put this slide up, and the next one, it's titled Practice Area of School Psychology, just to let you know that the regulation of the profession of psychology distinguishes between different practice areas. So what that means is that just because somebody is licensed in the area of psychology doesn't mean that they're licensed all across different domains. So for example, somebody could be licensed in clinical psychology or in clinical neuropsychology or counseling psychology or forensic psychology, etc. So every psychologist and psychological associate has to indicate on their declaration which area they're practicing in. So the practice area of school psychology has also just undergone a revision and is now broader than it used to be, and with a particular emphasis on the role of school psychologists in mental health. This next slide just speaks about the general core proficiencies and competencies that psychologists practicing in school psychology have to have. There's lots of other ones that I just haven't included in there, but you can see that the role of assessment is a part of that, but it also includes the ability to plan, execute, and evaluate appropriate academic and therapeutic prevention and intervention programs, as well as interdisciplinary teamwork. So psychological assessment is just one of the domains in which school psychologists practice. So I'm going to talk about the process of psychological assessments in the school board, in particular in our board. So the referral process starts with the school team problem solving, and if there's a referral for psychological assessment suggested, then that will be brought forward to the special education consultant for approval. And if the special education consultant approves, the principal or designate, which is often the CERT, will explain the SE1 consent form to the parent. And the parent then reviews and signs the SE1, which has a brief description of what the psychological assessment would entail. And then the CERT enters this is our new process, which we're just literally transitioning into last week, or the last 2 weeks, I should say. The CERT now, instead of creating the consent form and putting in an envelope and sending it to the board office, now enters the referral and consent form into eLight and submits that. It then comes to me. I approve it. I review it. I approve it on eLight. It automatically sends an automated notification to psychology staff as well as to the special ed consultant. And then when the student comes up in terms of the weighting priority, as defined by the date that the parent signed the consent form, the psychology staff conducts the informed consent interview, where they explain in detail the framework and conditions for the psychological assessment, so that the parent understands what they're agreeing to. And when the parent has confirmed their consent, then the psychologist contacts the CERT to schedule the time for the assessment. The consent process is very integral to our psychological assessment process. And I call it process because it's not just a one-time thing where a parent signs on the dotted line. Rather, it is the first step is the SE1 being signed. The second step is the informed consent interview, which also includes then the developmental and background interview with the parent, which we conduct over the phone. And then after the assessment, we confirm a consent to share the assessment results with the school. What are the assessment components of psychological assessments? The first piece is the referral form that is now also integrated into eLight in the form of a screen where the CERT can enter all the background information, meaning like what other health information is available in the OSR, what are the referral reasons, and what services in terms of a tiered intervention have been provided to the students so far in the school. So have they had a reading intervention? Have they had CERT support? Have they had an EA? Those are this is kind of the information that they put in the referral form. And then the next step is the parent interview, as I pointed out previously, where we gather the developmental and biographical information that's relevant for our understanding of the student's need. And I'm going to talk about that in detail later. And then we also conduct an OSR review to see how the academic progress of the student has gone forward since they have started school with us or in other schools that they attended before. So with that, that gives us a bit more information to interview the teacher or several teachers, depending on the situation, that are involved with the student. And then the direct assessment, testing, and observation takes place with the student. And with that, we also interview the student. And then that gives us some ideas of what standardized questionnaires we want to administer. So that can be, it's usually would be questionnaires that are given to the parents and to the teachers. And a lot of those questionnaires, they're co-normed so that they have norm values that are so that you can directly compare teacher responses and the parent responses in terms of the questions that are on those questionnaires and the scales that they assess. Sometimes we also, I should say, have student forms as well. Now, in terms of the parent-guardian interview and the teacher interview, we look at the family history, pregnancy, birth, and attachment issues. We look at the early development, language, and culture. We look at social history and environment. We look at medical history. And we look at school history and attendance. For sharing of results, again, this is a process where the first piece of this is the parent feedback. So the parent hears the information firsthand from us directly, and then with their permission, we share it at the school meeting. And then the information, the results get processed by the school and will be used where applicable. They're applicable with for the IPRC meeting. Now, the school meeting, depending on the age, we include the student into the meeting. If the student is younger or there's other considerations, sometimes we try to have that meeting with the student separately so that they're not as uncomfortable sitting in a meeting with a number of adults. So the school meeting includes the parents or guardians, the classroom teacher, the special education resource teacher, the principal or vice principal, as well as the psychology staff. And in the case of those staff members that are non-licensed and work under my supervision, I would attend the meeting as well if there is a diagnosis involved. As I said, the student will be involved in the meeting as well. Sometimes we call them in at the end so that they don't have to sit through the whole long process. So the process of the school meeting is that there's introductions, prayer led by the principal or the CERT. Then we present the assessment findings and recommendations. We also then invite observations from school staff and parent input in addition to the standardized and other processes and instruments that I talked about. But you know, there can sometimes be like anecdotal reports of progress since we started the assessment, or other information that had not been shared to kind of compare notes and bring it all together. And where applicable, a diagnosis is being communicated by a member of the CPO, the College of Psychologists, where applicable. And then we discuss next steps. What do the results mean? How does it affect the programming? What's been in place? Has it worked? What do we need to add to it? What other services is the student eligible for? And I just put this this slide in because it speaks to the multi-dimensional way in which we can address the students' needs, whether it is in the classroom or outside of the classroom. But it all occurs within the framework of universal design and differentiated instruction. So we have to see what, in addition to that, we need to do to help meet the students' needs. Next steps can be, as I mentioned, a recommendation for an IPRC meeting. It can be a revision or a new IEP. Placement options can be discussed, although we don't decide about placement, but we can consult about placement based on the student's assessment profile. And then what other programming could be recommended, what remediation might be advisable based on the results, like Empower, Lexia, Key Math, etc. And then we look at what other internal and external resources might be appropriate, particularly when we think about mental health intervention. Those are things that we can recommend, and we as psychologists, as well as our colleagues in social work, are the prime responders when it's beyond the level of what our CYCs can provide in the school. And as well, our assessments can determine eligibility for SEA equipment as well. Here I have kind of tried to illustrate the scope of our assessments. In the center is the achievement of the student, and we look at what factors can be relevant to understand if the student is struggling in their learning. So we look at processing difficulties in the big green circle. That can be memory, learning, language, phonological processing, visual and motor skills. We look at the cognitive ability or intelligence more narrowly, and I'll go into that in a second. We look at executive functioning, adaptive functioning, particularly if there's more broader concerns in terms of learning progress. We look at atypical behaviors and ASD-like behaviors. We look at attention, inhibition or impulsivity, activity levels and self-regulation in a more general sense, as well as social emotional functioning and mental health. So in terms of intelligence, we the second test here, the WISC or Wechsler Intelligence Scale for Children, is the most frequent one that we use, just in terms of the age range, and it's one of the tests that has Canadian norms, because there is differences between different countries in terms of the population scores on those tests. That's why for this test, there's Canadian norms. So we are comparing students with children and adolescents from a Canadian population. There's also different other versions for younger and older children and adolescents and adults. And we also have some other alternative instruments like the Stanford Binet, the LIDAR, and the Wechsler Nonverbal Scale to address the assessment needs of students that are ESL or are nonverbal or have language difficulties, to recognize and understand what their ability levels are when language is factored out, to determine their cognitive and intellectual potential. The WISC, our most frequently used test, is a 5-factor test that addresses verbal comprehension, visual spatial skills, fluid reasoning, working memory, and processing speed. So we don't only look at one score, an IQ, but rather we look at different aspects of functioning, strengths, and needs in a student's profile. And is the variability that we see unusual, or is it within the normal range? Not every student has a flat profile. We all have strengths and weaknesses, but is it to a degree that it is unusual and requires some accommodation or other supports? We look at other cognitive and processing measures, as I said, that can particularly are relevant for a diagnosis of a learning disability, in particular phonological awareness, other language skills, memory and learning, visual motor integration, and we also have some batteries that assess several of those aspects. Obviously, if language is a bigger concern, our assessment is a little bit limited here, and we might consult with speech language for a more in-depth speech language assessment if required. In terms of achievement, the most frequently used test battery is the WIAD-3, or Wechsler Intelligence Scale, Wechsler Individual Achievement Test. This is also a test that has Canadian norms. The other tests mentioned don't have Canadian norms, they're US-based, but the WIAD is the most frequently used standardized test in psychoeducational psychological assessments. It assesses 4 broad areas: reading, writing, mathematics, and oral language. And in all of those areas, we assess different parts of or different skills, from very more mechanical skills like spelling or word decoding, to more higher level functioning and higher level skills like math problem solving, reading comprehension, and essay composition. So we can break all those areas of achievement down into specific subcategories, including fluency. And then we go to the indirect measures, which are mostly standardized questionnaires that address other influences on students' academic achievement and progress. So that can include particularly executive functioning, attention, self-regulation, and mental health. And we get ratings from several settings and respondents. And for older students, we also get the student's perspective. There's several instruments that, particularly for social and emotional functioning, that are more general screening measures, like the BASC or the Beck youth inventories. And then if we see concerns in more specific areas, we can dig deeper or go more specific with Beck depression inventory, depending on the age, or the CDI, or the MASC scale for anxiety, where we also have a parent rating for that one. We then can also go more specific and test hypotheses in terms of a possibility of autism spectrum disorder, where we have a student where the community providers or physicians or community teams have not done so. We can use scales like the Autism Spectrum Rating Scale, the Social Responsiveness Scale, or we can do a more in-depth assessment with the Autism Diagnostic Observation Scale or the diagnostic interview. As well, we have adaptive functioning instruments, including a structured parent interview option for the Vineland 3. And these, again, are relevant for DSO eligibility and diagnosis of intellectual disabilities as well. In terms of the presentation of results, the most frequently used convention for describing test scores are percentile ranks that describe where a student falls compared to 100 students their same age. So you can see that in this diagram, there's specific conventions of how a score is classified or ranges are being described. Most frequently we use the Wechsler description system that has the boundaries, as you can see here, and the standard score that you see here below the percentiles are kind of like IQ scores, where the average score would be 100 and the average range would go from 90 to 109. However, as you can see by the illustration of this arrow, when you go with a little bit of a different description in terms of statistics, and you talk about standard deviation from the mean, you can use a different kind of classification. We often speak about broadly average scores that go from the 16th percentile to the 84th percentile. So there's different ways of describing scores, so which is sometimes a bit difficult for parents because different tests have different ways of describing scores. Percentile ranks are easy to kind of compare and understand. And again, a student who performs, for example, at the 25th percentile would be performing better than 25% of their peers. Now, I just want to spend a short time to talk about the difference between a diagnosis and an educational exceptionality. Oopsie. I just lost my. I think I need the control back because somebody stole my presentation. Wait just a minute.
No worries, Oliver.
I have the slow circle going. I don't know if you can see it. Okay, I'll have to try again. For some reason, I'm not able to share my slides anymore.
Okay. Andrea, are you able to do that on Oliver's behalf?
Yep, I'll pop on. Just give me 2 seconds.
Amazing. Thank you.
We were getting to the best part, Oliver.
I don't know. I just want to thank you, Andrea. I just want to speak quickly to the difference between diagnosis and educational exceptionality. The It's often confusing for parents when we talk about identification and diagnosis, because when we talk about identification, we talk about the ministry exceptionality, and all school boards, as you know, have differences in how they interpret those categories. And as I mentioned at the beginning, the only one of those categories that has really been revised or been worked on by the ministry is the learning disability, which arguably is an important one, but others like intellectual disability and giftedness have not. So and there's differences between different boards. For diagnostic purposes, most psychologists follow the DSM-5, which defines different disorders from a kind of the perspective of psychiatry and psychology. But for learning disability, there's a little bit of an issue because the newest version of the DSM-5 has a definition of a learning disorder that's not in sync with what is being used and how here in Ontario, and how learning disabilities are being described by the guidelines that psychological associations have issued. In particular, this has to do with the definition of learning disability, including cognitive ability in the broadly average range. And my last slide, I just wanted to also mention in that context that when we talk about diagnosis and identification as well, but particularly in terms of diagnosis, this is just one slide by Dr. Goldstein. It's just an illustration of the frequency of comorbidity or co-occurrence of different concerns, whether it's learning disabilities or mental health problems. And so we always have to look at all of these domains for students together, because otherwise we might miss an important influence on their learning that needs to be addressed to help and support students. And if we only look one-dimensional, let's say, for example, learning disability, we may miss other aspects that are equally as important for our support and programming and support for students. So that kind of concludes my my overview, and I'm certainly open for any questions. Obviously, this is just a cursory overview, but maybe a kind of an intro, so you can definitely ask me further questions.
Thank you so much, Oliver. I'm just going to go to the chat. Does anybody have any questions that they wanted to ask while we have Oliver here on his presentation? You can just, if you just want to type hand up or type in your question. And if you can't think of them right now, please feel free to make a note, and you can always, I'm sure Oliver would be happy to answer those if they come to you after the fact. Well, you might get off easy, Oliver. I don't have any questions right now. Okay. All right. Well, you are free and clear. Thank you so much. And like we said, I mean, it's always great to hear. Yeah, I agree with Rhonda. It's always great to hear, what's going on with your department, but just to have these updates and these overviews are extremely helpful for our group, because the psychology piece comes up quite a lot in our discussions. So we're very thankful to have you participate tonight.
Thank you, and I might add one little piece that's not about the presentation itself, but sure. I know that the SEAC always looking forward to updates regarding the waiting times. So right now we're in a little bit of a tricky situation just in terms of reporting, because we're in the last 2 weeks we've made the transition of our referral base to the eLite module, and it's fabulous now that it's working. It will be making things so much easier. It's just a little bit tricky right now because we're transitioning the cases in, and there's some little glitches to do a accurate reporting. We have about 262, I think, referrals on the wait list. Of those, we have assessed or in the process of finalizing about 65. Tomorrow we have a psychology meeting where we will compare the wait times between the different regions. The wait time, we're right now doing assessments of students that were referred November, December last year, and some areas are going a little bit forward to January and February. So it's between 9 and 12 months roundabout wait time. We have 2 vacancies that we haven't been able to fill since the beginning of the school year. One of them is filled since today.
Great.
So hopefully that will help us as well.
Great. Thank you. That's awesome, because you're right. We're always looking for updates. So that's really helpful. I appreciate that, Oliver. And good news on filling that role. One more to go.
Yes, exactly.
Okay, awesome. All right, thank you again. So if anybody does have any questions that pop up after Oliver is said and done, you can certainly always feel free to send off an email. I'm going to start with our next presentation. And so we have a transition presentation, which I know that we have all been waiting for and eagerly anticipating. So let me just grab my notes here so I don't miss anyone. So this evening we have itinerant certs Andrew Cordero, Fran Oliveria, and James McInnes, and they will present the transition presentation. So welcome to you all. Thank you for being here. Again, we're super excited. This has been on our agenda for a while, and I know that we weren't able to get to it last year. So thanks for being here, and welcome.
Thank you, Brenda, and thank you, and through you, Madam Chair, Fran, Andrew, and I would like to thank you for the opportunity to speak to you tonight on this important topic that in many ways is central to our work. Many of our students and their parents' first interaction with our special education, school-based, and board staff is during one of the major transitions. We look forward to sharing our board's philosophy with respect to transitions, as well as share the established practices for the many transitions within a student's educational journey. Throughout their education, all students face a variety of transitions, including the transition from home or from an early years program to school, from one grade or level of schooling to another, from one school to another, and from secondary school to an appropriate post-secondary pathway. Such transitions can pose a challenge for all students, but they can be particularly difficult and confusing for students with special education needs and their families. The coordination of planning well before the transition takes place can ensure that the student has all the necessary supports in place to make a successful and smooth transition. The Halton Catholic District School Board is committed to developing and supporting effective transition processes for all students with special education needs. HCSB personnel work collaboratively with parents, students, school board personnel, and pertinent community agencies to develop and implement transition plans for all students. So the addition of transition plans to a student IEP is rooted in legislation. Since 1998, transition plans have been required under Ontario Regulation 181/98, identification and placement of exceptional pupils as part of the IEP for exceptional students over the age of 14 who are making the transition from secondary school to post-secondary activities and community living. In 2000, the ministry policy document, IEPs, Standards for Development, Program Planning, and Implementation, set out additional requirements for the IEP, including the need for specific goals the actions required, and the person or agency responsible for or involved with completing the identified action. In 2007, with the release of PPM 140, incorporating methods of applied behavior analysis into programs for students with autism spectrum disorders, it became a requirement for school boards to provide a transition planning as appropriate between various activities and settings for students with autism spectrum disorders. We sometimes call these class-to-class transitions. More recently, evidence gained from research and practice has confirmed the value and benefit of transition planning for all students, including students with special education needs, whether or not they have been identified as exceptional by an IPRC. Successful transition experiences help build resiliency, support improved student achievement and well-being, and for students with special education needs, result in improved continuity of programs and services. As of September 2014, PPM 156, Supporting Transitions for Students with Special Needs, requires that students who are on an IEP have a transition plan for every stage of their education. The development of a coordinated and detailed plan for each key transition will help ensure that school and board staff are prepared to meet the needs of the student, contributing to smooth transitions and paving the way for the student's future success. The physical, emotional, and learning needs of the student must be considered when a transition plan is being developed as part of an IEP. Transitions in Halton Catholic, they are deeply embedded in our special education annual plan, fully explaining our processes. We also explain these to our parents in our parent guide to special education programs and services, and they are aligned. Transition planning is aligned with our Halton Catholic District School Board multi-year strategic plan 2016 to 2021. Specifically, we're referring to our two of our pillars, our achieving pillar and our belonging pillar. So our achieving, meeting the needs of all learners. One of our goals is parents, educators, and professionals work together to determine student strengths and needs. So some areas that we monitor this goal would be our transition meetings and activities, and also our kindergarten information evening for parents of children with special needs. With regards to our belonging pillar, embracing relationships and sustaining safe and welcoming schools, one of our areas, one of our goals is examine current transition programs and initiatives, and we monitor this through our adherence to regulations outlined in PPM 156 and PPM 140, and also through our followed established practices for transitions to support students. So everyone has an important role to play in supporting transitions, including our students, our parents and guardians, the role of the school, and the role of community agencies. So to ensure successful transitions, Halton Catholic implements a number of strategies, including, but not limited to the following: encouraging parents and community partners who have parental consent to notify the board about a student with special education needs well in advance of the student's entry or transition to school. Encouraging parental involvement in the entry or transition to school planning process. Establishing and maintaining links with community partners that provide services for students with special education needs and their families. Identifying key individuals who will play a role in the student's transition. Holding a case conference to share and review information and develop a plan. We gather information from parents and any community agencies or professionals who might have worked with the student. For instance, sharing relevant assessment reports, documentation and records, program and service recommendations. We provide orientation opportunities for our students and our parents, for instance, a transition visit to a new school. And lastly, we provide training for school staff to ensure they are familiar with effective strategies. This could include an occupational therapy recommendation to ensure our staff are ready to safely meet the needs of a new student. Next, I'm going to transition or pass over to Fran Oliveira, who's going to describe our established practices for transitions with regards to entry to school.
Thanks, James. Good evening, everyone. So I'll be discussing the transition into kindergarten. So after the parents register their child for kindergarten, they are encouraged to share any special needs concerns and relevant reports with the school. These reports will then be reviewed by the school staff and also the board staff. If applicable, the daycare or the child's previous school will be contacted as well. An observation visit will then be arranged at the home if the student is not in a daycare facility, or at the school or the daycare facility. This is to ensure that school staff can better understand the child's needs. From there, a transition plan will begin to be developed. And also, I'd like to note that with COVID restrictions, we did do our observation visits virtually, so this may have to happen again. Based on these observations and discussions with the daycare and the preschool staff, community agencies that may be involved, the parents, an independence rubric may be completed. From there, as James stated, a case conference will be arranged with the family, and any community support services involved are welcome to attend as well. Applicable board staff will attend, such as a speech and language pathologist or a behavior analyst if applicable. At the transition case conference, a transition booklet and countdown calendar will be given to the family in order to provide the student with some visual supports. Prior to the beginning of school, a transition visit may be arranged for the student in order for him or her to see the classroom. And this may also be done virtually if we are not able to go into the school. This is just an example of some sample visual supports given to the parents and the family. There's a countdown calendar as well as a transition booklet. A transition plan that is developed will be provided to families. The school staff will then review the child's needs, and this determines the most appropriate transition plan for that particular student. It's unique for each student. An IEP or individual education plan may be developed, as well as an IPRC meeting arranged as appropriate. Generally, we like to wait to get to know the student before an IEP is put into place, and the kindergarten program naturally gives many accommodations for students, so we don't often rush to put an IEP in place. There are some circumstances, however, especially if a child has some complex needs or needs equipment through SEA funding, we would put an IEP in place. Next, we'll be discussing transitions, class to class, grade to grade, and school to school. Some students require a specific plan to assist them with various transitions that occur throughout the school day. These can be from one class to another, from outside to inside, or from a preferred activity to a non-preferred activity. We often put visual supports into place, such as a first-then board, a visual timer, or a schedule. It also might be helpful to give transitional warnings prior to moving, such as in 2 minutes, we're going to be going to the gym. On this next slide, you'll see a sample class-to-class transition plan. This is taken from an IEP. The transition plans have a similar format. A goal is stated at the top. So this one is student will successfully transition from one class or activity to another. On a transition plan, there's also a specific action, the person or people involved and responsible for that action, as well as a timeline. These are some examples of visual supports that may be used for the student depending on their individual needs. Continuing with transitions from grade to grade, where appropriate, school staff may begin to prepare a student in the late spring for the fall transition to a new grade. If possible, the student can visit the classroom ahead of time. New routines, such as a playground area, may be discussed with the students. This is specifically for students that are moving to a different division. Visual supports, resources may also be given to the family. A transition visit may be set up in early fall as well, so that the student can visit his or her classroom. For school-to-school transitions, if a student with special needs moves to a new school or outside of our board, the transition plan will need to be updated. With parental consent, the current CERT will communicate to the new school CERT to discuss the student's profile, their strengths and needs. For students with more complex needs, a transition meeting or case conference with appropriate staff will be arranged by the sending school. It is their responsibility to arrange such a meeting. Following this meeting, the receiving school staff will continue with this transition process. We also have some community-based classrooms in our board, such as the CLC or Community Living class for students with unique and often complex needs. We have an ESC or Essential Skills class with for students to acquire essential skills in literacy and numeracy, and an environment that supports the development of social skills and also fosters learning skills. We have our Gifted class for students whose primary exceptionality is gifted. And we have the STC or Structured Teaching class as well for students identified with a developmental disability. So for the transition into these community-based classrooms, once it's been determined that the student's profile is appropriate for one of those classrooms, the parents will be invited to an open house or virtual tour. Transition visits to the new classroom will then be arranged for the student. From there, a regional IPRC and case conference with all applicable staff and parents will take place. And now we have back to James for the transition from elementary to secondary.
Thank you, Fran. The transition from elementary to secondary school is another one of the major transitions throughout a student's educational journey. Planning for the transition to secondary school could begin as early as grade 6. School teams and parents will begin to discuss secondary pathways. An elementary to secondary school specific transition plan will be created for all students with an IEP, outlining their specific goals and actions and timelines to ensure a smooth transition. Elementary CERTs work with the special education department head to arrange special education transition meetings for all graduating students with special needs. Often an IPRC is convened at the same time to review students' placements. Special education transition visits are arranged for the student's grade 8 year based on need, for instance, visits to a life skills classroom. Department heads may arrange a grade 8 transition day in the spring of a student's grade 8 year where students from all feeder schools with IEPs are invited to visit their new school to take part in orientation activities. And we do have some photographs, and this is from not the previous spring, but in years past. These photos are from St. Thomas Aquinas Family of Schools, where students from all the feeder schools came to St. Thomas Aquinas on the same day to take part in orientation activities, to meet the special education staff, and to become familiarized with their new school. Obviously, last year, as Fran mentioned, we did provide these transition opportunities, but they looked a little bit differently, and we're hopeful soon that we can offer them again physically for students to visit their new school when it's safe to do so. And lastly, SEAC equipment is also arranged to be transferred as part of the transition. And we do this for whenever students are transferring school to school, but especially from elementary to secondary. But we do transfer our SEAC equipment, whether it's internally or externally, to a new board. There are processes and practices in place to ensure all mobility equipment is transferred and set up. And we also have a special process for our assistive technology for students in grade 8, so that there's equipment ready for students when they enter grade 9. And we have a sample elementary to secondary transition plan. So the goal would be that the student will successfully transition from elementary to secondary school. Again, we have a goal, a person responsible, and a timeline for these goals. And one example of an action is that we invite parents to special education transition meetings in IPRC. The people are listed, people responsible for that action, and there's an appropriate timeline. So next, we described our processes that we have in place for students with special needs transitioning from elementary to secondary, but all students in our board are supported with this major transition from elementary to secondary school. And this falls under our student success department. So all students in grades 7 to 12 are supported in their transition to secondary school through the required development of an individual pathways plan, or IPP, outlined in Creating Pathways to Success. So guidance counselors and elementary pathways itinerants visit elementary feeder schools to support grade 8 students with course selection. Course selection is made through the My Blueprint program. So this is something that we do for all of our students, including our students with special education needs. My Blueprint is an invaluable tool that helps all students make informed decisions about their future and is a part of the student's IPP requirement. So again, we have 2 photographs of our elementary pathways itinerant visiting one of our classrooms. And in this particular class, they're visiting a structured teaching class in Milton to discuss My Blueprint and to get the students familiarized with the program. So all students, including our students with special education needs, take part in these practices. So there are many orientation activities planned for students and their families throughout the grade 8 year to assist with the transition to secondary school, such as a grade 8 parent information night and a grade 9 orientation day. On the next slide, I have some examples, and this is actually from one of our Catholic secondary schools. This is from Corpus Christi, and they very recently had their grade 8 parent information night. The event did take place virtually this year. And they are describing the transition activities that would be taking place for all grade 8 students coming to Corpus Christi, and we have similar events at all of our Catholic secondary schools. So again, these transition activities are for all of our students, including our students with special education needs. So they describe the guidance department coming to visit the school, course selection, and lastly, the Be a Longhorn Night in the spring of 2021. So next I will pass it over to Andrew, who will describe the transition practices that we have for students once they reach secondary school.
Thank you, James, and thank you everyone for giving us the opportunity to participate in this meeting this evening. My name is Andrew Cordero, and I am an itinerant cert, and I support 6 schools in the Loyola family of schools. And as James stated, I will be chatting with you about transition planning at the secondary level. Transition planning at the secondary level incorporates the strategies and processes involved in the micro and macro transitions that support PPM 156, which were outlined and exemplified at the elementary level by Fran and James. Our transition plans also support the HCDSB Pathways Framework, which endeavors to help students understand themselves as learners, explore opportunities, make decisions, and set goals and achieve goals and make transitions. Transition planning is an important part of our role as educators in recognizing the gifts in our students and working together to help each student find a platform that allows them to share their gifts with the world. Next. Thank you. So what is effective transition planning at the secondary level? Effective transition planning at the secondary level is based on a common understanding of the various opportunities and pathways available to students and is based on the understanding that pathways can change over time. The old adage, it takes a village, is very true when it comes to transition planning, and we purposefully repeated this slide here to reiterate the importance of the partnership between the student, the family, the school, and our community partners in working together to ensure that our students are making informed decisions and maximizing their God-given abilities. Some of the academic pathways available to students are a Certificate of Accomplishment, Ontario Secondary School Certificate, so the OSSC, which the student is earning 14 credits. The Ontario Secondary School Diploma, so the OSSD, where the student is earning 30 credits. The programming options at the secondary level are the Life Skills Program, Locally Developed, Applied, Academic, International Baccalaureate Program, so IB, or the Advanced Placement, which is AP. We selected this visual as well, as we feel it highlights our belief that there are many roads to success and many pathways one can travel to realize one's full potential. In our department, we have an understanding that we plan and adapt our transition plans on a case-by-case basis, because like many things in education and in broader life, a one-size-fits-all approach just isn't suitable. Again, going back to the idea that it takes a village, developing a transition plan for a student at the secondary level is done in conjunction with our colleagues in the guidance department. We rely heavily on this partnership as it provides a well-rounded and informed approach to student development and decision-making, and ultimately leads to student success. So now that we've looked at some of the programming options and supports available to students at the secondary level, we can now explore some of the elements of grade-to-grade transition planning that are incorporated into a student's IEP. Transition plans at the secondary level, again, are updated during regular IEP update periods, so October and February, and as needed throughout the school year. CERTs and/or department heads check in with students and teachers throughout the school year. Meetings with guidance counselors are encouraged and facilitated by members of the IEP team. My Blueprint helps students make informed pathway decisions and learn more about their learning profile, and is incorporated into the GLE, GLS, and careers programs. My Blueprint helps students to visualize what their pathway will look like based on their course selections, interests, and learning styles. So you'll notice again the emphasis on frequent check-ins between all members of the IEP team, and an emphasis put on understanding the student as a learner and the role this plays in determining a student's pathway. Here's an example of a grade-to-grade transition plan. So the goal here is to complete requirements for graduation, completing and fulfilling the required credit requirements, volunteering hours, and literacy requirement. I just wanted to highlight here how the format is the same as in the elementary transition plan. So for example, we have action items, person responsible, and timeline, and how a student's readiness and progress is monitored throughout the school year. This sample goes on to highlight how a grade-to-grade transition can incorporate multiple goals. So for example, the goal continues on or incorporates another goal here to determine curriculum supports to accommodate needs related to literacy, numeracy, and coursework, as well as social and emotional well-being at school. You can also see here in this transition plan how the people responsible are the members of the IEP team. Another one of the great supports that we offer students that have an IEP is the GLE program. It is available from grade 9 to grade 12 plus and is taught by a special education resource teacher. The grade 9 GLE program focuses on learning strategies to help students become better, more independent learners, learning how to develop and apply literacy and numeracy skills, personal management skills, and interpersonal and teamwork skills to improve their learning and achievement in school, the workplace, and the community, and building confidence and motivation to pursue opportunities for success in secondary school and beyond. So you may be asking yourself, how does the GLE program support effective transition planning? Well, in PPM 156, it states, individual transition plans that reflect the student's strengths and needs provide the foundation for successful transitional experiences that support the building of student resiliency. GLE promotes this by developing a student's awareness and understanding of their learning profile, by fostering a strong partnership between the student, parents or guardians, the CERT, classroom teachers, and guidance counselor, by developing the student's awareness of learning strategies that work for them, and by developing a student's literacy and numeracy skills. So if you could click, James. And just wanted to highlight some of the tools that students have in terms of being able to first identify their strengths and needs, and then finding the tool that allows them to broadcast their strengths. So now that we've looked at grade-to-grade transitions and the supports available at the secondary level, let's turn our attention to exploring secondary to post-secondary transitions. Some of the potential post-secondary destinations are post-secondary school, community integration through co-op education, so SEAC program, which is one of the post-secondary program options designed for some of our students with a developmental disability, apprenticeship programs, workforce, supported employment, day programming, independent living, supported living environment, or group home. Here's an example of a secondary to post-secondary transition plan for a college or university pathway. Again, the goal is to plan the destination pathway leading to post-secondary pathways at college or university. Here, I'd like to highlight how this transition plan supports a student in completing the requirements for graduation, investigating post-secondary options, and also the supports available at the school. Another element of our secondary to post-secondary transition planning is the grade 12 GLE program. One of the goals of the grade 12 GLE program is to teach students how to investigate trends and identify resources to support their post-secondary employment, training, and/or educational choices. It also focuses on developing a plan to help students meet their learning and career goals through the use of tools like My Blueprint. As you know, our spec ed departments are supporting students with various exceptionalities, one of those being developmental disabilities. These students are generally enrolled in a life skills program where a special education teacher starts the planning process by identifying the student's pathway first and then selecting expectations that support the acquisition of skills required for that pathway destination. And that planning and the resources are utilized at the elementary level as well. It's important to highlight here that students in this program may also require class-to-class transition plans to address their needs while navigating the school building and the greater community. Our A4 committee, which I'm a part of, have created a D2L that supports A4 assessment, programming, and transition planning. It is called Transition Processes to Post-Secondary Pathways, and it is organized according to the cyclical nature of transition planning. It is available to all certs and sets in the HCDSB. Community agencies are a crucial component of our transition plans for students with developmental disabilities. They provide parents with the information about the community programs and supports available in their community. They help us collaborate with families, and they collaborate with us as schools to support transitions. For example, they can help the family with a reassessment after age 16, which can be used to substantiate a claim for further support post-21, or help families navigate the system and acquire funding for respite, training, or community programs. They also help with connecting individuals and their families with supports available in the community, work in collaboration with community businesses and organizations to create employment opportunities for students. And some of our students are working towards a workplace destination. The goal here is to help the student complete his or her certificate of accomplishment, develop job skills, and prepare for a transition to work. In order to prepare for this transition, the action plans in this plan, the action items in this plan incorporate resume writing and the development of interview skills. As you can see, transition planning is complex, detailed, adaptive, and begins the moment an exceptional student registers at one of our schools. The purpose of all this work is encapsulated in this statement from Malcolm Gladwell's book, The Outliers, where he states, "Those three things, autonomy, complexity, and a connection between effort and reward, are, most people agree, the three qualities that work has to have if it is to be satisfying. It is not how much money we make that ultimately makes us happy between 9 and 5. It's whether our work fulfills us." In the HCDSB, PPM 156 manifests in this belief that our mission is to help our students find a path that leads to autonomy, which I like to think is independence that is guided by the precepts of our Catholic faith, complexity at their level, and a realization that effort leads to fulfillment. At this time, I believe we're going to be giving you some time to ask some questions, but first, I'd like to thank you so much for the opportunity to share our work with you. We hope this was enjoyable and answered some of the questions you may have had regarding transition plans. God bless.
Thank you so much, Andrew, Fran, and James. Fantastic presentation. I'm going to open this up for questions. I know we've been waiting for this one for a while, so I'm sure everyone's just digesting all the information. That was a lot of info, but all fantastic. So just a hands up in the chat. Yeah, Rhonda, go ahead.
Okay, I'm assuming that the parent, forget what we call it, the parent entry night of the already identified students transitioning into school was last February, correct? Would be around usually it's done in February. This is the JK entry night for parents and students that are already identified with something. Okay, so how are you guys handling this year? Just because I'm working with the Hamilton boards and we're all over the place with this. Yeah.
I can't answer that.
Yeah, it's tricky.
Usually you're right. It was in February and we got to do it last year. Yeah. I think we have to make that decision a little later when we know more about COVID. Jody has her hand up, so perhaps she can answer that in more detail.
For sure. Jody, go ahead.
Hi, good evening, everyone. Thank you, Fran and James and Andrew. That was excellent. I know I've seen it a couple of times myself, but I just want to say thank you before I answer the question. Sorry. So yeah, it is normally in February and information goes out to our schools. So we haven't quite nailed down that information at this point in terms of the date of the kindergarten information night. And I will be speaking with Stephanie to look at whether we want to hold it in February. We've made some changes to our kindergarten registration process where it used to be in person and now it's going to, well, now it is online. And as a result of that, we want to make sure that we're capturing everyone. So there's not just 2 days where students or where parents register their child for kindergarten. It's over the course of January and they register online and then they have to bring documents in. And again, I think that's going to be something that's ongoing. I haven't heard about how the schools are managing that in terms of getting the, say, birth certificate and the baptismal certificate, that information. So I guess all that to say that we're looking at the date, but that is, we will still host it, whether it's going to be virtually. Likely virtually, and whether it's still going to be in February, we will make sure that we get the information to our schools in enough time to let parents know and let our community partners know as well. We do work closely with our community partners to let them know, with the resource consultants through Community Living North Halton, to let them know when these events are happening. So we will continue to do that this year as well.
So stay tuned, right? Thank you, guys.
Stay tuned. I'm sorry, yeah. I wish I had an exact date for you, but it is something that we're still working on.
No, I was just curious, just to share that the both public and Catholic boards of Hamilton are doing the virtual. And yeah, and there's a lot of work involved with that, let me tell you. So they're doing all the pre-modules and everything so that families can actually go on and peruse prior to the actual date. And yeah, so I just throwing that out there. Good luck with that.
Thanks.
Maria, you had your hand up?
I did, thank you. And thank you for that presentation. Lots of great information. A lot of work went into that, obviously, so thank you very much. I do want to raise one thing that was missing, which is the transition out of regional specialized classes. And I'm wondering what's happened, because we talked about this quite a bit when we reviewed the Spec Ed plan. We had some suggestions, and the updates haven't been made to the plan, and they're not covered in the presentation either. So we talked specifically about students transferring out of a regional specialized class, and specifically with our gifted students, they're in a specialized class from grade 5 to 8, and then at the end of grade 8, they are facing a transition to a different school from elementary to secondary and into a completely different type of classroom. So what are we doing in those transitions? What's happened since this was raised as part of our Spec Ed plan review? And we did, when we talked about this, the suggestion was to not get too specific in the Spec Ed plan, to leave it a bit flexible. But in fact, the changes that were made were very specific about life skills classes, and talked about transitioning from specialized classes back to homeschool classroom. But again, we're missing the specific item that was raised.
Thank you, Maria, for the question. I think I'll attempt to answer that, but I think just for the purpose of time, I think Oliver also mentioned with his presentation, since we're limited to the 30 minutes, we are just chatting to give a sprinkle of all the things that we are that we do with our transitions. But we mentioned about the specific transitions into our community-based classrooms, our ESC classroom, our structured teaching, our gifted, and our CLC classroom. But as part of that elementary to secondary transition, we do have the process to transition all of our students from those community-based classrooms into their designated high schools. So for instance, if a student was attending a gifted class in Burlington, that they could be attending one of the 3 high schools in Burlington. So there is a process in place that we ensure that there would be a special education transition meeting, as I mentioned, and there would be opportunities to visit the high school, and all of those processes that are involved from elementary to secondary that I mentioned for student success and for special education would be put into place for all of our grade 8 students if they're attending any of our community-based classrooms.
So can I follow up?
Yep.
So thank you. I realize that the presentations are limited on time. But I guess the other part of the concern is it was not addressed in the spec ed plan. And we brought it up as part of that review. So I'm not sure why that is. And also, I know that all the grade 8 students go through, they visit the schools, and there's a lot of activities to get them sort of prepared for that switch from elementary to secondary. But again, the issue here is, and the whole idea between having an IEP is that these kids, all of them need something different than what all the other kids are getting, right? What we're facing here is, though, these students are going from being in a classroom with all gifted kids, all kids like them, very different experience. And now they're thrown into the mainstream. And it's not because their identification has changed or their needs have changed. It's because the board no longer offers that type of a classroom. So I think the board has an obligation to make sure that that transition, like all transitions, but is successful. And as I brought up when we talked about this before, we did a survey a couple of years ago, and there were some very concerning comments coming from some of our gifted students that, they either wished that they were back in a self-contained class, regional class, or they wish they never had been in one because, the adjustment didn't go well going into secondary. So that tells me there's a problem with the transition. So I think that it's more than just what all the other grade 8s get. I think there needs to be something more there. And the other question, which high school are they being presented transition activities for? Because typically what I've seen is all those activities are based on whichever high school is part of your family of schools, which may or may not be a particular child's home classroom. So they may be going back to their high school, family of schools, high school. So it might be a different, or they may be attending a completely different high school because they want to access an accelerated program like AP or IB. So, that all needs to be presented early on. They need to know what all the options are, and maybe they need to have access to all of those, like a variety of transition activities, so they can decide what they think is going to be it's a little bit more complicated, right? So they can make a decision as to which kind of pathway they want to take. And I'm just not seeing in the plan or in the presentation, and even on experience, all of that being taken into consideration. So I'm not sure how we move forward, because we did bring this up when the spec ed plan was being reviewed, but the changes weren't made.
Stephanie, I see your hand up. Did you want to address that?
I can, and I also saw Jody had her hand up.
Oh,
so I
sorry.
can let her speak first, and then I'm happy to jump in.
100%.
Sorry, hi, we were both on the draw there.
Sure.
Stephanie, sorry about that. I just wanted to address a little bit about the specifics in meeting the needs of our gifted students, because I do know that our sets do reach out to the high school department heads, and if there is a specific need that is related to the student's profile, that would be met through conversations and dialogues between the parents, the department head, and the sets to identify what that need is and create that transition plan. So I think if we go back to the spec ed plan and adding those details, as you mentioned, it would be really student specific. So I can't speak in terms of the spec ed plan, those changes. I know they were noted. I mean, we all participated in that, and I'm not sure if there's something specific that we can look at after that was missed. And maybe Stephanie, that's what you're looking at discussing there. But thinking about how the needs of our gifted students are met, as James identified, there are some things that all of our students in elementary school get, some different transitions for our students with developmental disabilities, and there are different transition plans put in place for our gifted students as well. So I feel confident that we are working towards meeting those needs, and it's that continual conversation and dialogue between the SET and the department head and the parents and the child, of course, too. I mean, I'm sure they have a say in how they need to be supported. The other thing you mentioned, is the school. Sorry, I just wanted to address the idea of the schools. So once the student has identified, let's say they're attending outside of their home school, they will have the opportunity to participate in the high school's transition activities. And again, or if there's something unique that needs to be met for that child's transition plan, then that can be put in place as well. But they do have an opportunity to be a part of whatever high school they choose, to be a part of the transition activities that are put in place by that school and that department.
And Brenda, that's what I was going to say, just from firsthand experience, having had gifted programming in several of the schools that I've been in. The students who are in the gifted programs are included in the family of schools school so that they can be part of the activities that are taking place, and they often like to be part of that. But we've also made very specialized arrangements to have the students visit the school that they will be attending. And if we have department heads coming over to the sending school, we've often had the department heads of the schools that will be receiving those students attend those meetings with parents as well. And with respect to the plan, I can't speak to that because I wasn't here, but I will work with Jody and the team to take a look at the information from last year.
Great. Thanks, Stephanie. Thanks, Jody. Is there anybody else that, before I make a comment, is there anyone else that has another question or comment?
Oh, sorry, Brenda, I just want to make one final kind of comment.
Sure.
Because it's not clear. So I'm hearing about transition activities for the school that the child will be attending. And I guess I'm just wondering, because in some cases, like, how do they make a choice as to which school they're attending? So they've already decided before that point, they've been presented with all the information, then fine, that makes sense. Sometimes it's tricky because some of the schools do, like when it's grade 9, take your kid to school day, a lot of the schools do their activities on the same day. So if a child wants to attend more than one school, right, it's difficult because they're all on the same day. I just want to make sure that they are being presented with the different options before they're deciding which school, and that they can, be able to take their time. Because let's say, for example, they want to attend an AP school. Like, for example, here in Burlington, Canadian Martyrs is our gifted school, which feeds into Notre Dame. But the child's homeschool could be Corpus Christi. So they're going to attend all the transition activities for Notre Dame. Corpus Christi is their homeschool, but if they want to take AP, it's Assumption, right? So I just want to make sure that they're getting all that information before they're deciding which pathway they're going to take and which school they're going to attend. So I just want to make that additional clarification.
Stephanie, I saw both you and Jody. You're like on
Sure.
Jeopardy. You both hit the button at the same time. Do you want to go ahead?
I'll start this time. What I was going to say is that with respect to AP for specifically, I know that the school that offers the AP program has reached out to feeder schools and elementary schools, and has done presentations for all of the students so that they have the opportunity to learn about the programming that takes place there. I think it's a very collaborative process. I think that where there is an interest, my experience has been that the administrators in those schools are very eager to share their programming with the students. And in terms of the timing, I've not had the concern come to my attention that there isn't enough time to decide. I think the biggest decision for parents at that time anyway was whether they want to send their student with the rest of the students that they've now made friends with to the school that's part of the family of schools, or whether or not they'd like to elect to go to the school that's in their community area. And sometimes they may have siblings, et cetera, that play a role in that. So I haven't had a concern about the timing of it. And I do know that we share the information, and it's also shared online with respect to the grade 8 information nights for all of our schools, and parents are welcome to attend any of those programs. I can pass it on to Jody if you'd like.
Sure. Yep, go ahead, Jody.
Sorry, hi. Just in addition, I know that in speaking with my consultant colleagues that run the CLCs for our sets for the gifted classrooms, they also have the AP present to the sets, to the classes about the programs early on, starting in grade 7. So they are having those conversations early with these students, thinking about that transition. As James mentioned, for some of our students, we can start as early as grade 6, depends again on their needs. So we're mindful that in grade 7, for the gifted students, that, you know, to start having those conversations about the different program options that are available, so they can start thinking about it, because we know it's a big decision, especially if they're not going to be attending their home high school.
Thanks, Jody. And just a quick, only because, and if everybody's okay with me sharing this, it's not a question so much as it is a comment. But you know, we're right in the thick of this right now. I have a son transitioning into grade 9, and I've worried about this since I transitioned him into grade 1. And we started these conversations in grade 7. We're at the point now where we are picking his electives, and as much as we all thought that he was going to go this way or this way, we've actually been able to come up through teamwork and multiple discussions and involving the high school team as well as his elementary team. We've come up with actually a bit of a hybrid model. So he'll be credit earning. He'll take a mix of some GLE and some academic courses, but you know, I just wanted to actually share how excited I am. And I'm actually been fairly calm in this process. And we're looking forward to him starting in grade 9. And he's going to work towards, you know, something which I didn't think he would before. And we're trying to find a really great balance between what he can do academically, as well as trying to balance some of his social needs. And, you know, when he started in grade 1, I think everybody assumed that he would go, you know, this way, and he's going sort of this way. And I'm very thankful for the transition planning that we've done and all the people that have been involved. And honestly, they've come to me with solutions and ideas because I didn't know what I was looking for other than, you know, my desires for him and what he wanted. And so I just wanted to comment on that because it's actually been a really positive experience for us. And I've been terrified of this. Like I said, and I'm not exaggerating when I say I started talking about high school in grade 1, grade 2. So just, you know, for those of you that are involved in that, I just thought you should hear that sometimes it's a bit of a success story, especially with a kid with multiple exceptionalities. Anyways, just want to share that for what it was worth. Sorry, Marie, did you have your hand back up again? Things were flashing at me as I was talking.
Yeah, I did, and
Okay.
I'm sorry. I don't want to take away from. I'm very happy that you're having that fantastic positive experience. And I didn't want to say this when Stephanie was saying she hadn't had complaints, because I was always my understanding we're not supposed to talk about our personal situations, but since we are, that I didn't have a positive experience in grade 8, and my child was not at our home school, family of schools. He was taking extended French. He wasn't even in a gifted class, but he was taking extended French. The AP school was our home school, And I asked in grade 7 for transition activities to that school because I knew, you know, the grade 8 classes, they go to the football game and they do all these things with the home high school. And of course, as Stephanie said, they want to be with their friends. And I was asking, I asked repeatedly for transition activities to not only our home school, but the AP school, which we felt was the best choice for him. And it was a real struggle with him and with the school to get it to happen. And once they finally did do the transition activities that I had been pushing and pushing and pushing for, it was instantaneous that he made the decision that we were hoping for. So this was a few years ago. Maybe things have gotten better, but you know, there are issues out there with these grade 8 students. So I just wanted to share that as well.
Did we have any other questions before we let our presenters log off? And thank you again for putting that presentation together. I recognize that this is a topic that we probably could talk about for a lot longer than the time we had allocated. And perhaps we're going to do some goal setting in our December meeting, but perhaps that's an opportunity for us to dive a little bit deeper into transitions and maybe, you know, pick it apart a little bit and spend some more time on certain areas. But I think that this was a great overview and provision of information that some of us may not have even had before. So thank you for that presentation. If we have any questions that come out after this, we'll send them over to you, but be on the lookout. We may ask you to come back again at some point. So thank you.
Thanks again for the opportunity. Have a wonderful night.
No problem. Have a great night, guys.
Thank you very much.
Thank you,
Have a
all
good
of
night.
you.
Okay.
Thank you.
So I'm just cognizant of the time. I'm moving to item number 3. So the approval of the minutes from our October 26th meeting. Thanks, Oliver. Have a great night. Was there any comments on the minutes? Did everybody have a chance to take a look at those? Okay, could I get a motion to approve? Okay, great. So Diane and Nancy, are you good to second? Yes. Okay, perfect. All in favor? You know what? I'll actually just say any opposed. It's probably easier. Okay, thanks, Paul. Item number 4, declarations of conflict of interest. Does anybody have any declarations? No? Okay. Item number 5, business arising. So you'll note that we did add some of the items that we discussed at our last meeting to the business arising chart. So they are there for your review. Is there any questions at all around that? Yeah, Maria?
Hi, sorry, this is one of my favorites. Yeah, I do. I'm not understanding. A lot of the items say ongoing, and I don't know what that means. I don't know why they say that. One of the items still has Wendy's name on it, so. But some of these are sort of one-time things, and some of them I'm not sure that there is any process in place. So, for example, the sharing of the ministry memo on spec ed funding, that was actually discussed in our June meeting. It's got an October date, I guess, because that's when it was brought up again. But we talked about that in June, and that's just a matter of forwarding a memo to SEAC members. So I don't know what ongoing means there. I don't know if anyone's actually working on a letter to the ministry about the spec ed funding.
No, I don't think we worked on that letter because we haven't been given direction on it. So that's why it's on there. If at any point we want to write that letter to the ministry, it's absolutely an undertaking that we can take. I think that's why it's still sitting on there until we act on it.
Okay, so
if you want to write that letter, or if you want to figure out how you want to put that letter, or how as a team we want to put that letter together, we can certainly do that.
Okay, so I'm just not sure what ongoing means. Should there be a target date? Should it be assigned to somebody? Should it be assigned as a future agenda item to discuss?
Sure.
I feel
what would the group like to do with it? Let's put it there. We can go item by item if we like. We want to pull up, Andrea, can you pull up the business arising chart if you don't mind? And while we have everybody together, why don't we go item by item and either take it off or assign an action item on it?
Brenda, can I chime in? Sorry.
Sure.
Would this not be more productive than to get feedback prior to the meeting as opposed to spending time on this here? If we feel that it's an item has been completed, then like I don't think there's anything that stops us from emailing in advance to say, hey, I think this item is completed. This is really just so that we can keep track of things that are ongoing, if I'm not mistaken. Similar to how we do it with board meetings.
Right. Yep. No, you're absolutely correct. But since it's come up and we have it here, let's go through and make those changes. And if we can take something off, I'd rather take that off. So let's just do that since it's come up. Is everybody okay with that? Sorry,
Yeah,
Andrea, can you make that a little bit bigger? It's probably just my old eyes that can't see the screen.
It's small. Yeah.
Okay, perfect. Okay, so the Maxi letter, we have done that. Do we want to take that off then? Show of hands, comments, yes, no?
Take it off.
Great, okay, that goes off. Let's go to the April 27th item here. So further breakdown of exceptionality data. Let's change the responsibility because it is no longer Wendy. So let's change that. Jody, we're going to slot your name in there, I would think, unless Stephanie have any objections to that.
No, that makes sense.
Perfect. And I think we leave that as ongoing right now because we are waiting for some things to be implemented, and then we will be able to take a look at whether or not we still need that information or not.
Can I recommend, can we put a target date down, and then if we don't meet that target date, we can just move it. But otherwise, I'm not sure how these things get addressed if they're just.
Sure. I mean, some of them I think are going to be ongoing, Maria. I think that's just it. If we leave things like development of subcommittees, that's going to stay as an ongoing all the time because we don't know what we're going to need subcommittees for. So I think it's important to keep it on there so that we make sure we're always paying attention to it. If we want to put a target date on, something else, I mean, do we still need this further breakdown on no exceptionality data? Can we take that off? Do we need that?
I think that was something we had asked for in the spring, recognizing that, it was a really, really crazy busy time and probably couldn't be delivered too quickly. But the question there was, we have a number of students that are with no exceptionality in our data. So the question was just, why do they have no exceptionality? Is it because they're waiting identification? Just to get an understanding. So I do think it's important for us to understand the population that we're serving. I think that's information that would be useful. And I would maybe just ask staff, when is a reasonable time that they could produce that?
I think we'd also have to, agree as a group, is that actually information that we do need to have, and do we need to have that kind of detail if it comes to no exceptionality? I mean, there could be some reasons why there hasn't been an exceptionality listed. And I don't know how much we can get into on some of those items and possibly have privacy issues. I don't know. So I know that we were given a breakdown of information by exceptionality. I think we just have to, as a group, decide, if there is no exceptionality data there, do we need to have that information on why there's no exceptionality listed? And if we are, then to what end? What is it we're looking to do with that information?
I just want to jump in there, Brenda. It's Rhonda.
Yep.
I'm asking that question myself because I know that there are boards that don't identify at all. They have very few IPRCs. I'm just saying that's their board policies. That's what they do. So I don't really know what the purpose. I'm assuming these are students with non-identified IEPs. Is that who we're referring to here with no exceptionality? Because there's some students that just don't fit into a category. They don't meet criteria.
Right. So I think, so further to your point, Rhonda, I think then the question, I know that we have seen reports in the past that have broken it down by exceptionality. If there's no exceptionality there, again, I think to what end are we looking for that information? So I don't disagree that we need to have information on the population that we're serving, but as it pertains to no exceptionality, I mean, again, why would we need that information specifically?
Well, I think
the other thing too we have to look at is that when we're looking at things like programming and when we're looking at things and we're looking at helping all students, and so yes, it's important to see the breakdown, you know, by you know, hard of hearing or by physical or by gifted, you know, LD. It is certainly important to see those populations so we have a glance at what that looks like. But we also have to appreciate that some of those those students with non-exceptionalities identified, they're still receiving supports, and I think that's probably the most important part of this. But sorry, Maria, go ahead.
Well, I was just going to say our mandate is to advise on programming and budget, et cetera, right? So how can we best meet that mandate without understanding the population that we're serving? And that's what data helps us to do.
Right.
And as well, I think this has been a matter, this is a matter that's of growing concern provincially, that the number of unidentified students is growing. And my understanding is the ministry allowed for students to receive, you know, IEPs without having an exceptionality so as to not, you know, slow things down, so that students that need services get them, but not to never be identified.
But that's not for us to make the determination on, though, Maria. I think that's outside of our mandate as far as that piece. I think
Maria,
sorry,
I'm not.
Sorry, I'm talk. Can I have the floor? Can I finish?
Yeah, go ahead.
I lost my train of thought, but you know, again, just to understand, like, are these just students that are waiting for an exception, waiting for an identification, or is there just, you know, are we just not identifying because we don't have to? It's not our, you know, yeah, it's not us to make. We're not talking about individual students. We're just trying to understand the characteristics of the population that we're serving. So that's what data helps us to do. Otherwise, we're operating in a vacuum, and I just don't think that's effective at all.
Okay. Rhonda, did you have a comment?
No, I just, yes, thank you. That comment, Maria, regarding the ministry didn't want students to, that they wanted all students identified, I'm not sure that that's completely accurate.
I didn't say that.
Oh, okay. What did you say? Can you just clear up what you said? You said that the ministry wanted what?
I didn't say the ministry wanted anything. I said that the ministry allowed for students to, they want the students to be receiving, students who need spec ed programs and services to be receiving them, not to be delayed, you know, by having to wait for an IPRC and all of that, particularly in smaller boards where they don't have the resources. So the idea, my understanding of the idea was, you don't need an identification to get an IEP because you don't want to be waiting, right? But the idea wasn't to never identify or to have mass numbers of students without identifications. Like, how do you know what their needs are without going through that process?
Jody, do you want to answer that? Because I'd have to think that the team would know what their needs are. But if you want to go ahead, Jody, and answer that, that'd be great.
Yeah, hi, I'll try to address some of the needs, Maria, that you're raising here. So I just actually want to make SEAC aware that in our board, we actually do identify students when they meet criteria for identification. So unlike Halton District, as an example, they only IPRC students into their specialized classes. However, here at Halton Catholic, we actually identify all of our students when they meet criteria. So it really, when we're looking at non-identified IEPs in our board, there are a wide variety of reasons, but it's not just because we don't want to, actually. And you're right, in many boards, they don't, and for good reason. I mean, you know, I've spoken to colleagues about it in other boards, and they've talked about the time and you know, staff and manpower to, in larger boards, to make those identifications and go through the IPRC process. But actually, in our board, we do go through that process for all of our students that meet criteria. So some students might have a non-identified IEP because they haven't met criteria. They've actually had a psych ed. However, they don't meet criteria for that. They might have an IEP because they have equipment. So they have SEA equipment, and as a result of SEA equipment, they would be required to have an IEP put in place, a non-identified IEP put in place so that they can have that C equipment. It might be that they're waiting for a psychoeducational assessment. So it might be that they're in kindergarten and we haven't had the IPRC yet, but we see that there might be some need to put some accommodations in place to support their learning profile. So there are a wide variety of reasons, but I just want everyone to be aware that in our board, we do actually identify all students that meet criteria.
Brenda, can I just add one more comment?
Yep. Thanks very
Rhonda.
much, Jody. Yeah, Rhonda, go ahead.
I do believe it was the ministry's intention that there were some students who do not meet criteria for an exceptionality, and that those students should receive the accommodations, if you will, and have an IEP generated for them, even if they did not meet exceptionality criteria. That was the intention, at least from the get-go. It may not be current practice, but definitely was the initial intention. Thank you.
Okay, so if we can just get back to this, because I'd like to get this business arising addressed before we move on. Can I just get then perhaps a show of hands for those that would like to keep this item on there? And if it's the will of SEAC to get that information, again, there was information that was provided. There was a breakdown that was given to us previously. Everybody would remember that. And then the one information that we didn't have more detail on was with respect to the no exceptionality. And I know that Wendy did speak to some of the reasons why that information wasn't available. One of them being, I think there was some privacy confidentiality issues. I know that that was mentioned. So if we're going to, I just need to know how we want to deal with this.
Brenda, can I just make one more comment?
Sure.
So I think this came up because we were presented with the like the ONSA stat or whatever our version of that, and it was noted that the number of students without exceptionalities had increased. So the question was asked as to what was behind that, and I can't remember the answer, but there was a request made at the time if at some point in time we could get some additional detail on that, and it didn't seem to be an issue at the time. There seems to be some opposition to it today. I'm not sure why, but there seemed to be agreement that it was a reasonable request and that it would be forthcoming. So all I was asking is, can we just put a target date on there? So I just wanted to give that bit of background.
Sure. And I think that, I mean, the discussion back to some of the points on business arising was target dates, but then it was also on whether or not we need to have items on there. There was some concern as to ongoing target dates or if they even need to be on there. So I think in the interest of cleaning this up and not having the same conversation next meeting is just to go through them and then make a determination. If it's the will of SEAC to keep these on, we keep them on. And if we keep them on, let's put a target date. If we don't feel that they need to be on there, then let's take them off. So if I can just get those who are eligible to vote, if people can just vote, if you're in favor of leaving this item on there, if you could just vote in favor, and if not, then we'll remove it for now and come back to it if we need to. Okay, thanks, Maria. I'll need everybody to vote on this, just so that we can make sure that we reflect everybody's will. And like I said, if the will is to keep it there, we'll keep it there instead of target date. So Rhonda, you're in favor of keeping it there? Okay, Deborah, you're in favor of keeping it there? Okay.
Sorry, Brenda, I meant in favor to review the list.
Okay, so what I'm doing right now is I'm taking a vote to leave this item, this business arising item, on here. So this further breakdown on the exceptionalities, that's what I'm looking to vote on.
Oh, sorry.
That's okay. So Maria, I've got you in favor, and we can do it either in the chat or if people want to put their microphone or camera on, I don't care. So it doesn't matter to me. So I've got Maria in favor of keeping this item on there. Let me just make a note. Okay, so I've got Deborah in favor.
And just a reminder, Brenda, that alternates can't vote unless their main member is not in attendance.
Yes, no problem. I'm going to write them all down and then we'll, So I've got Rick.
I'm the only trustee present, just FYI.
Okay. Nancy.
I wasn't being specific. I'm just general.
Monica's not here. Okay, so Deborah, I've got Maria. Okay. Okay, is that everybody that's putting in a vote? So I've got, okay, so Tracy, I've got you in favor of keeping. Deborah's in favor. Maria's in favor. So far opposed, I've got Paul, Rick, Nancy, and Diane. Okay, so my suggestion is we remove this for now. I know that we will be getting an updated information coming, I believe. Stephanie, Rhonda's not voting. Nancy, she's alternate. Stephanie, can you just clarify that there will be this a report coming to us possibly in the new year with that data?
That's true, Brenda.
Okay. So my suggestion would be at this point is to remove it for now. That's what people have voted in favor of removing it. And then when we have that presentation, let's see what that information looks like. And if at that point we feel that there's still some outstanding information, then I think at that point we look to have further information. So Andrea, if you can just remove that one. Do you know, Stephanie, when that will be available? When that information will be in the new year? I don't mean to put you on the spot.
I think it's January or February because we're working on our January draft and we are going between the 2 months.
Perfect. Okay, thank you.
You're
Okay,
welcome.
the next item we have is the development of subcommittees. So is everybody in favor of keeping that on? Is there any opposition to keeping that on? We just had it there as needed because I know that there was some discussion previously about the requirements of, okay, perfect. Thanks, Maria. In favor of keeping it. Okay, Nancy in favor. Oh, thanks, Paul. I see your note was presented in February last year. Thank you. Okay, in favor. Great. Okay, perfect. Thanks, Deborah. Okay, so we'll keep that item on there in favor. Let's keep that there. The next item is the sharing of the ministry memo on special education funding. So I know that that was a request, and do we have any update on that at all as far as if we're able to have that memo shared with us? Stephanie, can you comment on that at all?
I cannot comment on that, but we can certainly follow up. I think that's why it was left as an ongoing because we hadn't heard back from Aaron yet.
Okay, so why don't we set a target date on that then?
Brenda, can I comment on that, please?
Sure.
So the finance department actually offered to send it to us in June at the June meeting. I'm sure they were very busy at that time, and I'm sure it just slipped their mind. So I think that memo's available online. Like it's not it's a public document. So I'm sure if we just asked them that they would send it.
Okay, so why don't we put a target date of our next SEAC meeting?
That works.
Okay,
we'll
perfect.
follow up again.
Amazing. Thank you so much.
You're welcome.
And then we've got the next item, which is the letter to the ministry regarding special education funding model. I think this is a great idea. And again, if this is the will of SEAC, I don't think, I'm all in favor of us at any of these, any committees advocating for what they believe, needs to happen. So if we as a group believe that we should be sending a letter to the ministry regarding special education funding, let's do that. So what I look to see here then is who would want to take charge of that, and what we want to see is an end date for that, or as a target date for that. Any suggestions? Yeah. Okay. So, yeah, that'd be great, Maria, if you wanted to be a part of that.
I would just say for me, and I don't know if anyone else wants to be a part of this or if anyone else wants to take the lead on it, but I don't think I can do it in the next couple of months, but I'd be happy to put a target date of, I don't know, February, and target dates can be revisited. They're not, no one's going to hold your feet to the fire, I don't think here, but if we could put a target of February to maybe strike a committee or something, and then we can look
Perfect.
at it at that point.
Okay, let's do that. Is everybody in favor of that? Okay, Deborah in favor, perfect. Paul in favor, great. Rick in favor, perfect. Probably the easier way to do it. Is there any opposed? Nancy in favor, Diane in favor, Dan in favor. Okay, great. And Tracy in favor. Okay, great. So let's do that. So we'll put a target date then, the February SEAC meeting. Sorry, I don't have that date in front of me, Andrea. I apologize. Even if you just put February SEAC meeting and we can fill in that date. Oh, look, you already have. Okay. And then the last one here is there was some conversation last year, or sorry, actually it was this year. Well, I think it was last year and then this year as well, with respect to the community consultation section of the spec ed plan. And that would be the spec ed staff that would be in charge of that. I think we have an ongoing there because I think people are going to take a look, the staff was going to take a look at it and review the current practices to see if everything was being done according to what was supposed to be done. So I don't know if we need to, if there's a date to be assigned to that at this point. So yeah, Stephanie, do you want to comment on that?
Sure. So I can comment that the staff is already taking a look at the process, and the consultation piece in particular is a focus for this year. So with respect to a date, they've definitely had some conversations, as of late, and the spec ed plan review starts in March. So if we want to assign the date of March, and then we can provide an update at that time and make that a focus for the review. That would be a suggestion.
I think that would be great. Is there anyone that has any concerns with that? Okay, Maria, you have your hand up?
So I had my hand up before Stephanie spoke. Okay. So that's fine what she's recommending, but I just wanted to say, again, I know that I raised that one when we were reviewing the spec ed plan, and we had talked about looking at it early in the year to make sure that we had a plan that did comply with the ministry standards, because in my opinion, we're not. And so I think that's something that SEAC, community consultation, SEAC should be a part of that. So I think, that's fine for staff to come back with their recommendations or their view on that section. But I think SEAC needs to be a part of that discussion as to how we consult with the community on our spec ed plan, which affects the community.
Okay, so we'll put it there for, sorry, go ahead, Stephanie.
Yeah, and that's why I think it should come back to our SEAC meeting in March.
Agreed.
So that preliminary work will be done and shared with SEAC.
Okay, perfect. Is there any more questions on business arising before we move to number 6 on our agenda? No. Okay, perfect. Thanks everybody for your input there. Item number 6 is special education board policy review. We don't currently have any policies to review. Item 7 is International Day of Persons with Disabilities. Stephanie, I'll invite you to speak to that.
Thank you, Brenda.
Thanks.
So as a follow-up, we just did want to provide an update as to where we are with respect to the process of preparing for International Day of People with Disabilities and the initiatives that are taking place all of this week, and they started today. As was mentioned at a previous SEAC meeting at the October 2020 regular board meeting, the trustees considered a motion for the board to formally recognize the International Day of People with Disabilities, which occurs every year on December 3rd. The motion was passed that this day would be recognized and celebrated board-wide every year as a week-long initiative and be accompanied by opportunities for awareness and education, Since that time, the committee, made up of both SEAC members and HCDSB staff, almost 30 staff members, has developed materials to support the recognition of the event and to further enhance awareness and education across our system. In collaboration with Strategic Communications, a feature story has been posted on all of the school websites as well as the board page, and social media is being used to promote the week using the hashtag that was created by the committee, and the hashtag is HCDSB Diverse Ability, which really focuses on the diverse abilities that all people have. Based on the international theme for this year, Not All Disabilities Are Visible, daily themes have been established by the committee for each day of the week. That include today it was Acceptance and Inclusion, Tuesday is Visible and Invisible Disabilities, Wednesdays is Seeing Abilities, Thursday, Celebrating Differences, and Friday is Removing Systemic Barriers. A resource kit specific to each panel, elementary and secondary, has been developed to support the week. The kit includes for each day of the week the daily theme with related content, announcements, prayers, a story, image, video, music, and or a quote for daily reflection, connections to the Catholic social teachings and the Ontario Catholic graduate expectations, as well as a number of cross-curricular student learning opportunities, including activities, extensions, and a multitude of resources. We've also collaborated with Library Services, and they've provided many resources. You may have seen it on our social media, and it's their newsletter is actually posted on our board website. And in order to highlight December 3rd in particular, we did have stickers printed, and they've been provided to schools, and the digital image was also provided to our virtual school so that they can also participate. Furthermore, 2 videos were produced, not one, but we had time to produce 2. The first video is a launch for the week with a focus on student voice, and it's a compilation of student quotes and images from various schools across the system. And the second video is a culminating video, and it's called Ability Allies, and it includes over 20 allies speaking to the ways in which they support students and school communities in their various roles. And it really is a call to action to reflect on how you too, or we too, can be an ability ally. And if you're interested in seeing those videos, if you go onto the board site, to the featured story, you will see the links to those videos. We had a short turnaround time, but I do want to say that it was really a pleasure to collaborate as a team. As I mentioned, we had about 30 people who were on our committee, and we had 2 SEAC members. Thank you to Rhonda and Brenda for being part of the steering committee. And I also want to thank Denise, who assisted by chairing our committee meetings that we had. We had quite a few of them, and I was really pleased and proud of the team who came together to prepare for the week. So I do invite you to take a look at all the resources, the stories that have been posted, and to engage with the social media this week. And that's it, Brenda.
Thanks so much, Stephanie. It really was, yeah, we can share them, Maria. I was actually just typing that in as, yeah, we can share them. So we can send those links out.
Yeah, they're posted on the board site if you just go to the story, but we can send it.
Perfect, thank you. But just to, I know we're running over time, just to echo what Stephanie said, the committee rose to this challenge, a very short timeline. I could not believe the enthusiasm and excitement. We had so many ideas. I think we could have run 4 different awareness days. They were, yeah, just a really great job done by all. There was no shortage of energy. There was no shortage of excitement. The ideas were flowing, and I'm really, really, really pleased with what was produced. And kudos to Denise Colley, because she chaired and she took that and ran with it and kept us all in line and kept us all organized and kept us to task. And it was an absolute pleasure to work on this project with everyone. So I'm really, really proud of the initiative, and it's going to be great to see it roll out this week.
Thanks, Brenda.
So thanks, Stephanie. I appreciate it.
You're welcome.
Okay, so it's going to be you again. Sorry, before I do that quickly, is there any questions at all related to item number 7? other than us sharing the links? Okay, over to you again, Stephanie, for the superintendent's report.
Sure.
Thanks.
So in terms of professional development, all of our CERTs and SETs in elementary and the SETs in secondary were trained in the Self and Match. It's a self-monitoring and motivational system that's grounded in the principles of ABA. The iCerts and IEAs attended the Geneva Center virtual symposium. The consultants and coordinator attended the Osgood Law Conference for Special Education. Some of the consultants attended the virtual webinar, Restorative Response to Racism and Current Online Trends. And our November CERT Family of Schools meeting focused on supporting our virtual A4 students and the D2L resources. We held a new CERT in-service on November 23rd, and the topics included referral to identification presented by our psych staff, and EA managers also presented on the role of the EA and the role of the CERT in safe management. So a bit of a continuation from this evening, the ministry pilot project on supporting transitions to post-secondary pathways for students with developmental disabilities is taking place this year. It's a continuing project and pilot, and it has been extended. And a great deal of work has been done by the team, and a staff presentation is planned for the new year, likely in January or February, depending on what our agendas look like. The initial meeting for the current year was held in October, and it focused on the successes and challenges in programming and supporting transitions for students during COVID-19. Oliver spoke earlier about the new referral system. So our CERTs and psych staff and SLP staff have all been trained in the new referrals module through eLight. We're very excited about that. This new process has started and the feedback has been very positive. We've transferred the caseload of psychology staff to eLight, which has streamlined the referral process. And I was going to speak to the wait list and wait time, and Oliver spoke to that as well this evening. So thank you to him. In the area of social work, congratulations. I do want to extend congratulations and provide information to the group that Patricia Codner has accepted a position with School Mental Health Ontario. She will be seconded until August 31st of 2021. She will definitely be missed on our team, and we wish her all the best. Regarding the position of temporary chief social worker, an update will be provided at a future meeting, hopefully in December. And our social workers participated in the 33rd Annual School Social Work Symposium virtually on November 12th. This year's theme was Courageous Conversations about Anti-Black Racism, and Patricia Codner was actually a guest on that panel. Lastly, I wanted to mention mental health and well-being. The Twitter account, many of you would have seen that, was launched last week, I believe. You can follow at HCDSB_MHWB. The intent is to use the social media platform to uplift and highlight the amazing initiatives that staff and the system are doing to support mental health and well-being, while also sharing some very helpful resources from School Mental Health Ontario and community agencies. I know that the Twitter will also be used to retweet many of the activities that are happening in our schools. There's lots of great things happening in terms of mental health and well-being, and it's a platform to share and expand that community. And that's it, Brenda.
Great, thanks so much, Stephanie. Was there any questions at all for Stephanie on her report? No? Okay. So trustee report, we've got Trustee Guzzo here in place of Trustee Duarte. Trustee Guzzo, would you be able to give us the trustee update?
Absolutely. Thank you, Trustee Agnew. So just the last couple of board meetings, we had the pleasure of having Dr. McGanny on our November 3rd, 2020 board meeting. She attended virtually and gave an update and answered some questions. If anybody is interested, please feel free to go to our YouTube channel. The link is there. The Milton Secondary School Ultimate Boundary Review and Interim Accommodation was decided at the last board meeting due to the overflow and overcapacity at Milton Secondary as we wait for the 2 new schools to be built. The new Oakville Elementary School was announced, will be built just north of Dundas in Oakville. It's that wonderful time of year again where we have the Keeping Christ in Christmas competition. Today was the deadline, or actually tonight is the deadline at midnight. So if any of your children are aspiring artists, vocalists, or just talented and want to share their God-given talents, please have them submitted, or I hope they have submitted it. It's always a wonderful time of year, and I always, I think there's trustees get just as much pleasure of seeing all of the amazing people or students that send in their beautiful, beautiful pieces of work. And just an update on our bullying prevention and intervention committee. We have representation from SEAC on that committee. We've met twice. We've broken into subgroups, and we're working hard at making some really great progress on updating our policy and recommendations for our policy, and it'll eventually come back to SEAC. And other than that, we have our next board meeting December 1st, which is tomorrow, and we will have elections for our chair and vice chair. Other than that, that's the update for the last month.
Great, thank you very much. Is there any questions at all on the trustee report? No? Okay, thanks again, Nancy. So item number 9, SEAC discussion. So I did have one item on here that I wanted to mention. I had sent an email out early last week with respect to the vice chair position. So unfortunately, as I said in my email, Tammy has had to resign from our SEAC board, and she'll be very missed. She was an excellent member, and I'm sorry to see her go. We're hoping to have a new rep from LDAH sooner than later. It was so great to have somebody from that organization. But with her absence also leaves us with a vacant spot for vice chair. So we have elections for chair and vice chair coming up in January. So we have this meeting, what's left of it, and then we have a meeting in December. And so I had sent out the email to see what people wanted to do, if we wanted to put forward an option to elect a vice chair for the next meeting, or if we just wanted to leave it as it is for the next meeting, and knowing that we're going into chair and vice chair elections in January. So was there any thoughts on that, just so that I can know what your ideas or what your comments are on that? Is everybody good leaving it then until January? Paul, leave till January, thank you. Anyone else? Rick, agree, okay. Okay. Tracy, agree, okay. Okay, perfect. Okay, great, everyone. I just wanted to make sure so that nothing got missed, and we didn't, I didn't want anyone to feel that we were not purposely replacing that position. It's just the timing of it, with it being so close to the election. So we'll leave it as it is. And like we said, we have whatever's left of this meeting, and then we have our December meeting, and then we'll go into elections in January. Was there any other items for the SEAC discussion?
Can I just ask one quick question, Brenda?
Sure.
I know we're short on time, but is there any update on the bullying policies working group? I know we have some members that are representing SEAC there, so is there anything to share?
Yeah, so I think that Trustee Guzzo mentioned that in her report.
Sorry, I missed it.
That's okay. Nancy, was I correct? I thought I heard it.
She did, Brenda.
Okay. She may have just stepped away. So I can give a really quick recap. Nancy probably did a better job, but just a really quick recap that we've had a couple of meetings. We're going through systematically through the policy. There's been input from everyone at the table. It's a pretty robust group of people representing a lot of different areas. Nancy, you're back. Do you want to just recap that again? Sorry.
Sorry, my computer froze there, so I apologize about that.
Just for the bullying policy working group update, if you could just recap that part quickly.
Oh yeah, absolutely. So we've had 2 meetings. We've split up into subgroups. One is in regards to discipline. One is for equity and inclusion, one from a SEAC perspective, and the last one was from, oh, Brenda, I just lost it. What was the last one? Oh, mental health.
Mental health, right.
Mental
Yeah.
health. So there's, I think, 17 of us. So it was split up, and it's a mixture of trustees, committee members, student trustees, and senior staff, and then it's led by a superintendent who's in charge of safe schools. And ideally what we're doing is we're trying to make recommendations for the policy. Like one of our goals is to ensure that whatever the policy is, that there's consistency across the board with all schools, so that it doesn't matter what school parents have their children attending, they'll know what the process is, they'll know how to reach out, they'll know what to expect from administration and from teachers. So really looking at the consistency piece and the communication piece with parents. That all being said, it is a working group, which means that it will come back to the respective committees. It'll come back to SEAC, it'll come back to CPIC, and ultimately back to the policy committee with the recommendations made. And then once it's at the policy committee, then it will be what the final recommendations are, and then ultimately to the board for further for final approval. And we also have research participating as well, because one of the recommendations that it looks like is going to come out of it, I don't want to give too much details because it might change. It will come back for final kind of review of what's happened. But there is talk about, having some stakeholder feedback in regards to what parents know and what they understand and what the expectations are.
And Nancy, sorry.
You
saw it? Yeah, sorry, go ahead.
Yes, Rhonda is on. We have one person. There she is. It is a very fluid process. Maybe Rhonda, can you talk to your experience of it? Is that okay, Brenda? I know it's late, but
yeah, no, it's so funny because I was saying to Brenda, I think that we might want to speak to this tonight. I'm not fully prepared, but I will say that it's been very interesting from the point of view, there's been some tricky moments and just trying to take into account every aspect of bullying, and then of course the standardization of the approach and the intervention. It's been quite a process, and as a very large working group and a lot of passion. So line for line, word for word, we are going through the document and trying to revise it to meet the needs entirely. So it's been great.
Yeah,
and we sorry, Nancy, no. We will give a review, a more detailed review of it when we're ready to go, I'm sure. We Absolutely. Meet again, I think, on the 9th, right?
Yes, on the 9th. Yeah. And I think the biggest piece that most people don't recognize is all the different groups that actually feed into what happens with bullying. There's the social work piece. There's the CYCs. It's not just simply a school matter. It really, there's so many different departments that feed into it, and that, as Rhonda said, it really is overlapping. And that's one of the things that having all of these people sit at the table really is such a reflection of who it affects, who is part of it, and what resources are available.
Okay, great. Thank you to both of you. And yeah, I look forward to when when everything will come back to SEAC on that. Okay, item number 10, meeting summary and next steps. I think we had some great presentations tonight that we've been waiting for, especially the transition one. So I was really happy to see that happen tonight. I would just encourage you again, if you did have some questions. I know that sometimes it's a lot to take in. I know that our group is always fantastic about answering your questions. So if you perhaps wanted to, because there was a lot of presenters, so I'm wondering if it's just easier to perhaps send the questions to maybe Andrea with a copy to Stephanie, or to Stephanie with a copy to Andrea, and then Stephanie can make sure that the appropriate people receive your question as it pertains to the presentations this evening. I think that would be great. And We've got our next meeting coming up on Monday, December the 14th. So during that meeting, it will be, we're going to try to do some goal setting. We're going to do a goal setting exercise. I know that it's really important for us to establish the things we want to focus on. So we thought December is a little bit of a lighter meeting. We usually have a social in there, which we probably won't be able to do in a traditional sense. I know we won't be able to do, but we're trying to find some other ways to make it a little bit of a fun piece for our December meeting, and we'll have the goal setting piece and then anything else that might come up between now and then that we need to put on the agenda. And as always, if you have any ideas or there's something you'd like to see on a meeting agenda, please just let me know. Okay, for absenteeism this evening, I received regrets from Trustee Duarte, Marika Murphy, and Trustee Carabella. So I'm wondering if I could get a motion for absenteeism. Okay, thank you, Nancy. Can I get a seconder? Rick, thank you. All in favor? Any, or I guess I should just say any opposed? Okay, and item 12.2, do I have a motion to adjourn? Diane, thank you. Moved by Diane. Do I have a seconder? Seconded by Nancy. Thank you so much. So if you will join me in the sign of our faith, we will do our closing prayer. So in the name of the Father, and the Son, and the Holy Spirit. Blessed are you, O God of all creation. Each day you spread before us the rich and wonderful diversity of the human family created in the divine splendor of your love. Fashioned in your image, you call us to love one another with the same tender care with which you brought us to creation. Each one of us is but one small part of the glory that is you. As we serve the students and families of the Halton Catholic District School Board on the Special Education Advisory Committee, fill us with your grace, guide us with your wisdom, and give us the strength and courage to do your work, so that it may always be said of our every act, God saw that it was good. Amen. In the name of the Father, and the Son, and the Holy Spirit. Thank you, everyone. I look forward to seeing you all next meeting. And in the meantime, if you have any questions or comments, please just flip off an email. That would be great. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Brenda, for a great meeting.
Thanks, everybody.